Tonight at 9:30pm GMT over on the Cthulhu-Kin and Friends show, I shall be hosting a Prime Minister's Questions Response stream. It is undoubtedly going to be about Brexit. I apologise. The 29th is fast approaching, and I'm not entirely sure now that MPs have taken control of the negotiations, even though there are none to have, what is going to actually happen. But it is somewhat important that we address any and all comments that crop up. Link to the channel below. Now, as it has been also poorly timed, it is right that we now discuss Articles 11 and 13. Many have freaked out, and I'm sure they are justified in that. I personally have made it a point to stand back and wait for the result, and watch the inevitable fallout as people go batshit insane. Some saying their careers are over. YouTube will die, Google will pull out. They may pull out. But after watching the rip-roaring success of Spain's attempt at policing the internet, where Google pulled out, I can see the EU managing this with great success. Before I go into that, the voting and what happened in the Parliament itself, which is a Mickey Mouse court at best, I think it wise I tell you what I intend to do going forward. See, I'm more than happy to sit here with notes in a journal that I use for videos, and read to you what has happened, paint a picture like I said yesterday, and if I have to cite sources, I'm more than happy to archive them, if that is a way of getting around it. I will use memes where possible, because I've heard that they are in fact exempt from this copyright directive. Yay. The protesters outside Parliament, EU Parliament that is, I love that you call it a parliament, that's pretty charitable, were certainly making their voices quite clear, and this does actually raise an interesting point before I get back to myself going forward. Some on Twitter, and I wished I'd saved the tweet so I could show you, talked about how people were protesting against the copyright directive, and how they were just as bad as those protesting against Brexit. However, and I would make this point quite clear to those who have made this fundamental mistake, Brexit was down to a people's vote. Articles 11 and 13 never went to the people. In fact, this is one of those few times where I think there is a huge amount of elitism going on, where people are trying to clamp down as much as they can and funnel the news as best they can, which I believe is a bit more of a dictatorship than it is a republic, which I believe the EU is trying to be. Sorry, a federalised state. My mistake. Big difference. So going back to my going forward, I'm not going to be showing many images, if any, related to articles I'm going to cover, but I will of course cite them. I do not want you to believe I am passing off fake news, which is what this does. If I'm not able to cite sources so you can get best context to understand the points I'm making best so you know I'm not bullshitting you, there is a chance it manufactures fake news, and I do not want that to happen. I want to be able to make sure that everything I tell you is factually accurate and comes from an opinion that has some base of sense to it. It is also worth pointing out now, because this is quite irritating, a number of MEPs, after the votes were cast on amendments that were all summarily rejected, admitted they pushed the wrong button. 10 so far have come forward and said this, which is quite tragic. Many have laid the blame at the feet of a number of Swedish MEPs, with, and I'm going to link the tweets below, Mariette Schack pointing out that people had in fact voted against it, but pushed the wrong button, which is a shame really, isn't it? But then at the same time you'd have to argue, and I'm not going to say sorry for mispronouncing your name. Some will just say it to save face, all the while pushing the button knowing that they are doing something that many are arguing will censor the internet. It's quite fascinating to me that while the EU gives off the impression that it wants to help big companies monopolise the news, it simultaneously wants to anally probe the biggest one, in Google that is. No offence here, but none of the others are as big as Google, and you're fucking Google off. Interesting to note that YouTube, the subsidiary of Google, has been fighting against this. We all know this, with a number of videos appearing on the YouTube creators channel, most recent being on March the 4th. There was a statement issued yesterday after the vote by YouTube creators Twitter, where it said the final version of the EU copyright directive is an improvement, but we remain concerned. Article 13 could still have unintended consequences that may harm Europe's creative and digital economy. We urge EU member states to keep these concerns in mind as they move to implement these rules. When I was thinking about how best to address how I move forward with my content, many mentioned to me that possibly my game channel would be affected. I don't believe that to be the case. Many also mentioned that my political stream channel could be affected. The political recap streams I do with Trups, perhaps, but not Parliament, not Prime Minister's questions, because that is something in the public domain. That is something for the public to use. In fact, the government doesn't own what they say, because that is there for the public to scrutinise. It's why they don't monetize that channel. UK Parliament, that is. So I don't believe, going forward, that those channels will be affected. This one potentially, but we're in a bit of an odd bind. You see, a huge amount of the concern I have comes down to how these rules affect me in a country that is supposed to be leaving the EU. The government might try and ratify it into our legislation to uphold certain standards that the EU itself sets. I would argue, as we are an independent state, or we should be in a few days' time, depending on what the MPs try and force through, which they can't because seriously they don't have the time to do it. I think they're just doing it to force us to beg for either enough referendum or to rejoin the EU at that point, none of which I would agree to in the slightest. But that's for later. So in all honesty, I don't want to be putting a tinfoil hat on to try and work out how we, the United Kingdom, are going to be affected by Articles 11 and 13. I am well aware that our MEP representatives for nation within the council that voted on this, they voted for it. So I know that the Conservative government and the pawn licence is enough of a giveaway of how ridiculously backward they are not in favour of a free internet. I stand by a belief that I know Sargon of Akkad has mentioned, where a digital Bill of Rights should exist. But who comes up with it and how it is enforced, I don't know. A number of news outlets that have covered this, some have taken the scaremongery tactic, others have made it more of a very dumbed down version, the BBC being a perfect example, which essentially says it will hold tech firms responsible for material posted without copyright permission. But who owns the copyright is the argument and the problem. I'm sure somebody's going to say that because my avatar is inspired by Cthulhu, H.P. Lovecraft owns it. But that's not how it works. The same can be said for an interior of a sunken submarine. Or wait, I have a Jackson Rhodes on the wall in one of my subsets. Jackson owned that guitar. This is how pedantic some might get. But I don't believe that these rules are as pedantic as that. Many tech companies that are against this have argued that artists are already paid fairly under the current system, which they are, because copyright is the legal right that allows an artist to protect how their original work is used. It's why you'll see watermark on stock images from websites, which I don't use because seriously, I'm not leafy. It doesn't take a few seconds to either go and buy the image or find a version without the watermark, or get the permission of the artist to use it. It's another one of those major reasons why everything in my video belongs to me. My voice, my background, my avatar, all mine, including maybe some of the memes because I get bored sometimes, okay? Notice you've not seen a Picard one on any of the screens yet. Give it time. Hell, even the 2 videos of the squid avatars in cages, Prat Cthulhu and Dork Cthulhu, named in honour of the prophet Cthulhu because he's a fucking idiot, and Geek Cthulhu because I'm not repeating what I just said. A number of the campaigners, because there were a bunch of petitions, of course, against this that had over 5 million signatures, but those against the EU Copyright Directive included Wycliffe Jean, the Internet Creator, Tim Berners-Lee, Debbie Harris, Paul McCartney, and to just dumb down what Articles 11 and 13 are, because I think it right that you have the most simplified version possible. Article 11 essentially states that search engines and news aggregate platforms should pay to use link from news websites. As if they didn't already. And I would argue the additional traffic drummed up by a search engine would surely offset this money. I would also argue how this money is then collected and distributed is of great interest to me, because I can imagine a surcharge or handling fee being applied by the EU which would render the money then being generated null and void. Article 13 holds larger companies responsible for material posted without a copyright license. Tech companies already remove music and videos which are copyrighted. Under the new laws, they will be more liable for any copyrighted content. So whereas previously terms of service insulated the companies from what people posted, which was normally flagged, reported and removed, because that's actually not a bad system, it's just a crying shame that people abuse the copyright system because they're delicate little snowflakes. Now they are being mandated and summarily punished, which would in turn force the companies to step back, which means you would need to apply filters to content before it is even uploaded. These additional hurdles and obstacles are the reason why YouTube or Google as a whole is considering pulling out of Europe, which for me, and I'm going to state this now, YouTube is what makes the majority of my monthly income. It is my job. I do have a cleaning job, yes, and that pays my bills. But to live, I earn money from YouTube. I won't deny, if YouTube or Google as a whole pulled out of Europe and I was no longer able to upload, I would have to use a VPN, of course. But I would risk losing so much because of this. And quite frankly, that is unacceptable. Linking to sources should not be taxed. And I know you call it paying those who put the information on their website as opposed to the search engine. But this would happen on YouTube as well. You are harming a lot of people who are self-employed because of some principles that don't really stack up. You're trying to police the internet, and while it's great that memes are exempt from this, it doesn't cover creators because your rules are vague. Because what can and cannot be copyrighted and how it is and is not implemented is vague. And that worries a lot of people. Worries me a little, because as I stated, this is a job for me. I enjoy this. I enjoy the live streams and I enjoy making videos. So I'm very much intrigued to see how this affects me. And that sounds selfish, but I don't really give a damn. Going forward, as I've stated, I will do what I said I would do. Just talk, if I have to. Response videos are dead. Well, kind of. And news coverage, I like talking about the news. I like finding things that stand out and intrigue me. So I will be patient as I always have been. And we will see how this progresses as Articles 11 and 13 are implemented. So if I don't see you over on the Cthulhu-Kin and Friends show tonight at 9:30 PM GMT, I hope you all have a lovely day, Wednesday no less, and thank you all for listening.